to show you the step-by-step of how I grow onions from seed, but before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the why. Why would you want to grow onions from seed instead of sets? Now, when you're planting onions, you have two main options: to grow from a seed and seedlings or to plant sets, S-E-T. And a set is like a little tiny marble-sized onion bulb. And I failed miserably at growing onions from sets for many, many years. It wasn't until I switched to seeds and seedlings that I had success, and I've been growing big, beautiful onions ever since. And I think that makes a lot of sense once you understand a bit of onion biology. Onions are biennial, which means that their life cycle would span 2 years, like out in the wild under natural conditions. The first year that an onion grows, it wants to make and store a lot of energy, so it grows a really big bulb. And then after a period of dormancy, in its second year is when it would send up a flower stalk and produce seed because it wants to reproduce. So the problem with a set is that it's technically a second year onion and it has reproduction on its mind, whereas a seedling grown from a seed is a first year onion and it really wants to grow a big bulb, and that's also what I want it to do. So if you're somebody who has struggled to grow onions and you've never tried growing them from seed before, I think this might be a game changer for you. It all starts, of course, with growing really healthy, robust seedlings, just like these, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do that. First things first, when do you start the seeds? Well, I like to start mine anywhere from about 8 to 12 weeks before our last frost. And I've had success anywhere in that window. Of course, if you're in a cold zone, that makes sense. If you're in a warmer zone or even a more tropical zone, I'm not exactly sure when the best time is, and you'll have to do a little bit more research on that. Here's my setup and equipment. I have organic potting soil, a heavy-duty tray without holes in the bottom, and then these deep pots, and I'll talk more about these in just a second here. I'm also using a humidity dome, a seed starting heat mat, which isn't necessary but is helpful, seeds of course, and then some labeling equipment, and I will try to link as much of this as I can in the video description below. I always use an organic potting soil to start all of my vegetable seedlings, and in the case of onions, it's important to have a good quality soil, not a seed starting mix, because we're not going to pot these up. Whatever pot you plant your seeds in is the pot that your seedlings will stay in until they go out to the garden. And I wanted to mention, I'm not necessarily recommending this brand that I'm showing here. This is actually the first time I've used it, so I haven't tried it yet. I haven't vetted it, but I do like that it's organic, and I do like that it says there in that pink circle that it feeds plants for 3 months. That's really important. It's something I look for because some seed starting mixes and soils don't have enough nutrients, and if that's the case, your seedlings will not thrive and they can even die. Most potting soils will come to you a little bit dry and even can be hydrophobic, which means that they don't readily absorb water until you kind of coax them into it by stirring them around. So it's really important to pre-moisten your soil. I just like using this old recycled lettuce container. I've probably been using this for like 4 years. It doesn't have to be fancy. Any kind of tub works, just something that you can get in there and get the mixture stirred around and get the water incorporated. The Goldilocks point is that it's wet but not sopping. You can see some drips coming out there, and it holds its shape when it's squeezed, but it also crumbles and falls apart really nicely. This soil is absolutely perfect and ready for seeds. All right, let's talk pots. Well, you can use something like these shorter 6-cell seed starting trays. I really prefer a deeper pot for onions, something like this 5-inch pot, which I've had so much more success with. There's a ton more room for the roots to grow, and because of that, the seedlings can grow a lot bigger and more robust. The type of onion you grow really matters, and I think this is where a lot of gardeners fail. Onions are categorized in 3 groups based on day length, which is based on your latitude. So there's long day, intermediate day, and short day onions. And you have to make sure that you're growing the right kind for where you live. I'll link to a map below so that you can look up which ones would be best for you. Also on the topic of onion seeds, onions are one of the very few types of seeds that just don't have a very long shelf life. So they are the one crop that I make sure that I buy new seeds every single year. If you're trying to grow onions from old seed and you're finding that you're getting like 0 germination or very low germination, that's probably why. And by the way, as I get into the actual planting of the seeds here, I just wanted to say that there are a lot of different ways to start seeds correctly and successfully, and this is just the way that I do it. So to get started, fill your pots to the top with soil, and then I like to give them a little bit of a wrap on the table just to help it settle. Onion seeds don't get planted very deep at all, so you can really fill these pots almost to the top. And then I like to smooth and even out the top of the soil just so that it's easier to see and control where the onion seeds will go. Seeds need warmth and moisture to germinate, so even though this soil is moistened, I'm going to give it a little soaking with my spray bottle just on the surface to make sure that the seeds have plenty of moisture. I saw something on the seed packet I wanted to point out. It says germ 81%. That means when they tested these, only 81% of them sprouted, which is kind of low. Look at this packet, says 97%. And so because I know that, I am going to overseed these a little bit. I'm going to plant a few extra because I know that they're not sprouting super great. Onion seeds aren't hard to plant, and they're definitely not the smallest seeds of the plant world, but they are fairly small, and they're dark colored, which makes them hard to see once they're on top of the soil. So what some companies do is actually add a colorant to the outside of the seed so that you can see them better, which I do think is really helpful. So if you're wondering why some of your onion seeds look funny, that is the reason. These ones happen to be cream colored, but I also have some that are more of a whitish gray color too. Onions are just fine to be grown in groups or kind of clustered all together in these pots, and I'm planting about 15 to 20 seeds per pot, and these pots are 3.5 inches square by 5 inches deep. And you can see that as I'm placing the seeds here, I'm kind of spacing them out. I'm definitely not fussing over it too much, but I do want to give each little seed a little bit of space. And just to be clear, because this is a little bit different than most other crops, I will not be thinning these. There will be 20 seedlings that come up in each of these pots, and that is how it will be. One other thing I wanted to point out are my labels. I am someone who likes to grow a lot of different varieties of things, and so I always put the labels in before I add the seeds. That way I don't forget, and there's no messing them up, and I know exactly which ones are which. The next step is to cover up the seeds. So you're going to take your moistened potting soil, same soil that you used to fill the cups, and sprinkle it over the top. And the way that I like to describe this is like sprinkling brown sugar or like crumbling brown sugar over your oatmeal. It's a very light layer. We're aiming for no more than about 1/4 inch and try to keep it as even as you possibly can. Once the seeds are covered, I give them just a little pat with my finger so that the seeds make really good contact with the soil and can pick up all that moisture. We're just about done. The last thing I'm going to do is move these over to the heat mat. And if you don't have a heat mat, that's okay. They should still come up all right as long as your house is warmish, like 70 degrees. And then I'm going to put on the Humidity Dome, which is just a fancy name for this plastic cover, which helps hold in the moisture and is actually pretty important. And even though this doesn't even fit, it's still going to do a lot to make sure that the soil on top doesn't dry out and the seeds don't dry out either, which if you let that happen, you're going to have really slow germination and they might not even come up at all. It's really imperative that the seeds don't dry out even a little bit while they're trying to sprout. So as an extra layer of insurance, I'm adding, I don't know, a cup or so of water to the bottom of the tray. The pots will soak it up and it'll just make sure that it stays extra moist in there. What about light? A window is not sufficient, in my opinion, to grow onions. You will need a grow light. If you don't have one and can't get one, a better option than starting seeds inside is to look into winter sowing them. I just have this one grow light suspended from the ceiling, and this is what I grow all of my seedlings under. I just rotate them through as the season goes on, and it works really well for me. Onion seeds don't need light to sprout, but they will need light as soon as they come through the soil, so you don't have to turn your light on now, but if you are prone to forgetting or you don't check on your seedlings every day, I would say go ahead and turn it on now so you don't forget. It's been 5 days since I planted the onion seeds, and look! They're starting to sprout. You see the little green poking through? I love that. I love seeing that. And 5 days is really good. You should be seeing your onions come up in definitely less than 2 weeks at the most. After my seeds are sown, I like to come and check on them at least every couple days just to make sure they're not drying out. And you can see here, I'm starting to get some dry patches. Look at the top of that soil. So I'm going to come through and just saturate it gently with my spray bottle because there are a lot of seeds that haven't sprouted in here yet. And even the ones that have sprouted will appreciate the moisture in the soil. It'll help them come through it a little bit easier. And then I'm going to make sure and put the Humidity Dome back on. That plastic dome stays on the whole time until pretty much all of the seeds have sprouted. The second video in my series here about how to grow onions will show you how to maintain your seedlings and how to harden them off and how to plant them. But I didn't want to leave you hanging, and I wanted to make sure I gave you an important note about what to do once they come up because sometimes they need a little trim. If your light isn't strong enough, sometimes they have a hard time standing up right away once they unfurl from the soil. So I like to come through and just give them a little bit of a trim, any that are flopped over or kind of broken. I snip off the ends to help them stand up nice and straight. You can also see here that some look like a bow where they have a straight tight side and a bent curved side, and those ones always need a little help, so I make sure and trim any that look like that, and it doesn't hurt them. Of course, if they don't need it, don't trim them, but if they look like they're needing some help and they're not perfectly straight, go ahead and give them a little snip. For now, I'm just going to keep these watered. I'm going to keep them trimmed so that they look nice, and I, in general, don't like them to grow above 6 inches tall, so if they do that, I'm going to trim them back too, just like this. And that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you found this video helpful, I would love it if you could give it a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you are the first to know whenever a new video is posted.